So I play Warzone from time to time, and I would say I'm kind of casual. I've noticed that from season to season that there would be a certain group of weapons used consistently until either a new release, rebalancing, or just a new season takes place. I'm going to talk about my experiences with this and give my thoughts on it and beyond. This idea that I want to bring up is power creep, and I'll explain further. But to start, in terms of gaming, you may have heard the word meta being thrown around. If you don't know what meta is an acronym for the most effective tactics available. Anything that is classified as meta should help you reach the objective of the game. So for Warzone's Battle Royale, it would be to be the last one standing out of the other competition. You would use a certain loadout that would get you to that goal, such as using a heartbeat sensor to find your opponents, or certain weapons to take them out before they do to you. In terms of weapons, each one is unique in their own way. Each would have their own functionality, such as automatic and semi-automatic, and their own stats, like accuracy, damage, and so forth. This would lead to a diversity in terms of gameplay and play styles. However, there may eventually come a point where there is a meta that brings its own set of problems. So let's say there was a certain gun that you wanted to use, for whatever reason, whether it being maybe an aesthetic or sentimental kind of thing. Using it would put you in a disadvantage. For example, if you like the Modern Warfare AK-47 as it has a bayonet as an attachment, I believe that's the only gun that has a bayonet as an attachment, it would be powerless in comparison to the Cold War Season 2 FFAR. You could argue that it depends on the situation, as like the bayonet's only good in like really close range, but that's besides the point. If you played Warzone in Season 2, you'd know what I mean. The point I want to bring up is that sometimes things don't become meta because of their relative power, it is because they are unfair. There are some weapons that function well and could be considered fair due to their design, limitations, and restrictions. But some of these weapons never make it up to the top tier to be considered meta because they are too fair. Due to imbalance, it is difficult to use what you want. You either have to use a counter to the meta, which is something you probably don't even want to use, or you have to use the meta. So now I'm going to bring up the idea of power creep. I don't think this is an idea that has been brought into a Call of Duty discussion, but considering that Warzone is, I believe, a first of its kind in the franchise, I could see why. Warzone is not a typical Call of Duty game in that it doesn't have a 1-year lifespan. Some could say that there have been Call of Duty games that lasted more than a year in terms of support, but Warzone is probably going to be supported beyond 2 years. So what is power creep and why do I bring it up? Power creep is when there is an increase in relative power as content is released. This is usually subtle and increases gradually over time. Essentially, it is new equals better, to put it simply. For example, the Kilo 141 is a standard generic weapon, but the release of the Growl 5.56, I'm just going to call it the Growl, has a little more accuracy, making it more favorable. Later, the AS Val releases with higher rate of fire, making it more favorable. So this is the subtle aspect of where newer equals better. So now you probably get what I mean. There would come a point where the older guns become powerless to the latest weapons, and it would be obvious when you make the comparison from the old to new. So what you could do is pretty much just compare one of the first guns released to the most latest, and if there is a noticeable difference, then pretty much power creep happened. Other Call of Duty YouTubers would have talked about this as there is a time to kill or TTK problem, pretty much referring to the amount of time it takes to eliminate a person. The Cold War Season 2 meta, which mainly consisted of the Cold War AUG, MAC-10, FFAR, M16, as well as the Modern Warfare CR AMAX and SICOV, all have pretty high TTK, wiping out players in seconds. This is not fun, as you spend time looting and preparing yourselves at the start of a game, only to be deleted in a snap. The meta weapons essentially broke the game. All the fair guns are pretty much obsolete and there are no counters to the best weapons. Like, you could use an RPG on them and pretty much take them out in a snap, but if they have an FFAR, they'll probably take you out before you do to them. Now, I'm not necessarily against power creep, as there are some positives to it. Like, it hypes up future content, making it more exciting for existing players, exposing them to new experiences and making the game less stale. Like, imagine seeing the same weapons such as the M4A1 over and over and over again. It can also boost sales and content like the bundles in the store, in turn supporting the game's longevity. But with the positives comes the negatives. The developers would have to release content that is more powerful than the ones before, or else the game becomes stale and, there'll be a drop in sales. Another big problem is that the game would become a lot less friendly to new players, as they have to understand the new content while being at a disadvantage to the new meta. Imagine a Christmas noob, for example, getting blown out by the meta's TTK. The game can almost be seen as pay to win if there comes a point where unlocking new content is so hard that it is essentially locked behind a paywall. Like, imagine a potential PPSH coming to Cold War and Warzone in a loot box, or a bundle, for example. Power creep can be problematic in future game design, as the game goes through a vicious cycle of releasing stronger content to the point where people aren't going to use bullet hoses, but rather delete buttons. So what could be done in terms of power creep? For me, that is a difficult question. A solution that is often brought up is weapon balancing. Weapon balancing with all the buffs and nerfs can fix the game's unfairness or staleness. However, that would make the game become inconsistent. It would make for those who paid for content feel disrespected. This also includes those who grinded and spent a lot of time on said content, such as, grinding for gold camos and whatnot, and so forth. So it's not just those who paid money. Imagine grinding for gold camo or maybe, dark matter camo, and then your favorite gun gets nerfed to dust. You know what I mean? Another issue is that once the meta goes down, the second one takes its place. So let's say, for example, the AUG was top tier, but then suddenly it gets nerfed. The M16 would just take its place pretty much. Some people complained about Call of Duty games only being supported for 1 year. Now, would the game still be fun if it was in a 1 year cycle? Having it in a 1 year cycle can make it so that there isn't too much noticeable power creep. There would always be a fresh start to a somewhat same game every year. It would essentially be a hard reset, yet still have the same bare bones of a Call of Duty game. Saying this kicks out the idea of longevity out the window. It would hurt those who paid for content in the game, as it would be rendered useless beyond said game's lifespan. If it were to happen, pretty much that would be, I would guess, a Warzone 2 or Blackout 2. So to conclude, the meta would most likely exist in any competitive game. Though one of the biggest problems that everyone's bringing up is TTK, which I do believe needs to be addressed. And with saying TTK is a problem, sometimes things don't become meta because of their relative power. It is because they are unfair, hence the TTK problem. I would consider a game in a broken state either if the game is actually broken or if the meta has no counters at all. You can't use your favorite unique weapon or even experiment with a forgotten one, as it is either you using the meta or lose, Also, this idea of power creep may be applicable to other things. I've heard that there is a power creep problem in Overwatch, but I don't play Overwatch that much now, so don't take my word for it. So that's pretty much it. Tell me what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? Is there something I missed? Or is my whole idea wrong, false, rubbish, or BS? Comment what you think, and I'd like to have some perspective on this. I've got nothing else to say, and thanks for listening, I guess.